Stacy. By special request from my youngest son, I'll be making baklava for Christmas. So baklava is one of those desserts that you can make 2 to 3 months in advance and freeze it. And so if you want to beat the holiday rush, this is a great dessert to make ahead of time. So this recipe is going to be done in 2 parts. The first part is we're going to be layering the pastry and the filling. And then the second part will be to make a syrup that goes on the top of this as soon as it's done coming out of the oven. All right, so the first thing you're going to need for your first portion is 1 of the 16-ounce boxes of phyllo dough. And this package, it comes with 2 little smaller packages inside, which is great because that's exactly what I need. And then we're going to have 1 1/4 cup of melted butter, 4 cups of chopped walnuts with 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. So I'm just going to go ahead and put on my gloves because this is going to get a little bit messy here. I'm going to mix the cinnamon and the walnuts pretty well because this will serve as our filling. So what I've done is I first lined this pan. Now this is a 12 by 18 pan, 2 inches high. It works really well for this recipe. So the first thing I did was I went ahead and I cut my parchment paper to fit. The parchment paper is optional though. If you don't have any, you can just add an extra layer of butter to the bottom. I just prefer the parchment paper because it does help with sticking. So we're gonna go ahead and brush on a layer of butter on the bottom of this parchment. And then we're gonna start layering our phyllo dough on this pan, but we're gonna do 2 layers at a time. So we'll have 2 layers on this side, and we'll put 2 layers on the other side. It's okay if it tears a little bit. You're just gonna press it together. And then once we have the 2 layers, we're gonna go ahead with another layer of butter. It takes a lot of butter for this recipe, so don't be surprised. You might even need to melt more butter, you find, later on. It depends on how much you use. But I started out with the 1 1/4 cups. Okay, and then we're gonna do 2 more. So now the goal is just to repeat this process of putting down the 2 layers of phyllo dough and a layer of butter until we get about half of our dough used up, which makes about 8 layers. So now that we have our first layer done, we're gonna sprinkle on our nut and cinnamon mixture. It doesn't need to be too thick. We just need a nice layer to where every bit of it is covered with some of the nuts. Okay, so now that we have our filling down, we're gonna place in 2 more layers of phyllo dough. Like I said before, it doesn't matter if it's torn a little bit, it'll all come together in the end. We're gonna put our butter over this. So I have now finished doing all my layers and my filling, and I'm just gonna go around and tuck the sides in just a little bit, just to make sure everything looks a little neat and tidy. It'll help when we're scooping this out of the pan. Before you bake baklava, you wanna make sure you put your cuts into it, because if you don't, it's just gonna crack if you try and cut it afterwards. So you can either do squares and go straight across, or you can do angles. It doesn't matter, it's up to you. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just do squares. It's a little easier. I use my dough scraper because it cuts in there really nice and easy. It's a lot easier than a knife would be. So I would recommend you use something like this, or even a pizza cutter. If you put a knife in there and you try and slice, it's just going to pull the phyllo dough apart. You do have to be careful. You kind of need to go slow, and you need to kind of hold the phyllo dough down as you're making the cuts. Otherwise, it's just going to start sliding around. I just put the baklava into the oven, and so now I'm just going to throw this syrup together so you can see what it is. Again, this is something we do at the very end. As soon as the baklava comes out of the oven, we're going to pour this syrup over the top and then just let it kind of blend in with the baklava. So we're going to start it with 3/4 cup of water, a 1/2 cup of honey, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 1 cup of granulated sugar. That's all it takes for the syrup. I just need to stir this, make sure all the sugars are melted, everything's well blended, and then I will just keep it on warm until the baklava comes out of the oven. I just pulled the baklava out of the oven, and now I'm going to go ahead and pour the syrup over the top as evenly as I can. And then after that, we just let it sit for a couple hours, let it absorb the sugar, and then it's ready to serve. Now, if you don't want to eat it on the same day, just wrap it up in an airtight container, and you can either stick it in the freezer, or you can just keep it in the airtight container for a couple of days on your countertop. Anyways, it's almost done. All right, that's all there is to it. Have a great holiday.